So we're looking at the parts of the cell in this section, and the first part of the cell that we need to talk about is the cell membrane, and another name for it is the plasma membrane. And we talked about these adorable little molecules in our last unit, not in our last unit, but in our biochemistry unit. They're called phospholipids. And if you remember, they have a head and tails, and I usually draw a smiley face on the head because the heads love water. And that's why you have the heads facing the water here. And over here, the heads are kind of upside down to these, and they face the water here. So if you look at a cell, let's draw it over here. A cell has water outside, and it has water inside. The cell membrane is a barrier to the water. So a barrier would be something that does not mix with water, meaning it would be hydrophobic or nonpolar, and that's what this part is. So this part is nonpolar. And then this part, the part that loves water, is the hydrophilic part, and that part is the part that mixes with water. So the lipid part keeps the outside of the cell separate from the inside of the cell, and the hydrophilic parts, the heads, are the part that makes it all possible because it makes the molecule able to sit this way with the nonpolar parts here and this part being attracted to water and that part being attracted to water. But if you look at the cell membrane, there's a lot more to it than just the phospholipid bilayer. There are these things in it. These are cholesterol, and they help make the cell membrane a little bit less fluid. And then there are proteins, and so the proteins are the green ones, and they can do all kinds of things. So here's a protein that's attached to another protein, and that's attached to parts of the cytoskeleton, which will be other proteins, and that will help kind of hold stuff in place with the cell. Here's another protein that might be a receptor for a hormone, for example, excuse me, or a receptor for a neurotransmitter. These are also proteins, but they've got these things that look like stop signs, look a little bit like glucose, right? Remember glucose looks like this, C6H12O6, and they are. They're a bunch of glucose molecules put together. And if you remember the different types of polysaccharides, the different types of carbohydrates that I made you learn, they were starch, cellulose, chitin, and remember glycogen? Glycogen is that polysaccharide that is an energy source in animals. And so think of glyco as a carbohydrate. Excuse me. And so glyco is standing for this part. So the glycocalyx, that would be all the carbohydrates. This thing, the protein with the carbohydrate, we could call it a carbo protein, but we don't. That would be maybe what I would call it. Scientists call it a glycoprotein. So glyco means it's this carbohydrate, and protein is this part of it. Sometimes it doesn't show it in here, but sometimes you'll actually have a glycolipid. What do you think that stands for? Glycolipid. That's a carbohydrate stuck to a lipid, just like you have a carbohydrate stuck to a protein. Oh, well, look, there's some over here. Glycolipid, right there. So you have the carbohydrate part stuck right to a phospholipid. So it's kind of cool. Okay, so the cell membrane is composed or made of a double layer of phospholipids and cholesterol here, and proteins and carbohydrates. So all of those things. So pretty much you have a representative from all of the major groups except nucleic acids. So you've got carbs, lipids, and proteins in the cell membrane. The cell membrane surrounds the outside of all cells, whether it's a prokaryote or a eukaryote. It controls what enters and what leaves the cell. So there are only some things that can go straight through a lipid, and then there are other things that will actually have to go through a protein, which I'll show you later. But the cell can control a lot of what goes in and out of it. So here's just a picture of a phospholipid. Sometimes students wonder, hey, how do scientists know all this stuff? And part of it is being able to image it. So you can see the phospholipid bilayer there. Here's just a quick little video that keeps playing the same thing of this single-celled organism, and you can see how flexible the cell membrane is there. So I just think it's a cool one. So that might not even be coming out in this video. Anyway, the cell membrane is flexible and allows a unicellular organism to move. Cool, huh? Homeostasis. You remember homeostasis, I think. That means the internal conditions of a cell remains constant. So it's maintained by the plasma membrane. Remember, this just means the cell membrane, controlling what goes in, what enters, and what leaves the cell. Fluid mosaic model. That's a model. Remember, let me go backwards a second. Just kidding. No, I don't. Just kidding, just kidding. I'm not trying to stop that. Okay, so remember, sometimes you see beautiful pictures of, I can't even pretend to draw it, but mosaic is one of those really cool, I don't know, you can't really call it a picture, but you take little pieces of tile and you put them in some pattern to make a picture. So anyway, that's a mosaic. Fluid means it kind of moves around. So here's the fluid mosaic model, meaning that if you look, you can't really see it from the top, but if you were to look from the top, you could see these phospholipids. They look like tiles with stuff stuck of different, different types of things stuck around them. So, and they can move a little bit. So this one can kind of shimmy one way or another a little bit. So fluid means the individual phospholipids and proteins can move. They shift a little bit. They shift a little bit in the layer like it's a liquid, not a really thick, viscous liquid. And then the mosaic means the pattern produced by the scattered protein molecules when the membrane is viewed from above. Phospholipids, they make up most of the cell membrane, and if you remember to put your smiley face in here, which of course doesn't exist, that will help you remember that the head of it always says, I love water. And the tails, of course, do not. So this is the picture that I always draw. It really looks more like this, though. The black parts are the carbon. You've got hydrogen in blue. That's probably the phosphate group. There's a nitrogen in here somewhere, too, and some oxygens. This is actually a better picture because it's showing you the actual chemical structure. So here are your fatty acids, here's glycerol, and here's the phosphate group, and look, there's a nitrogen up at the top. So yeah, this one's the phosphorus, and then here's your nitrogen. The oxygens are these bigger, kind of, I don't know, almost pink ones here. So that's what a phospholipid looks like, and the head is always drawn kind of big just because it's a circle and it's easier to draw. But if you look at this and you imagine a bunch of these put together, they would actually be, let's say there's another one right here. You can imagine these things stuck right next to each other, but the heads have a little space. So that's going to be important when we talk about what can go in and out of the cell membrane, because some stuff that wouldn't mix with the heads can actually squeeze into here, and if they can mix with the lipid part, they can actually come through. They can dissolve in. So the phospholipid, you really, really need to know this molecule. It contains these things called the tails. Called the fatty acids, or the fatty acid tails. And these chains are let's see, do they love water or not? Well, here's the one that smiles and loves water. So nope, the bottom part does not love water. So they are nonpolar or hydrophobic. Oh, look, hydrophobic. So make sure you're writing in nonpolar there. If I'm going too fast, pause it. The head, I love water. The head is polar, and it contains a phosphorus group right here that has a negative charge and a nitrogen that has a positive charge, has glycerol. So anyway, it has two fatty acids. It's got glycerol, and then it's got this phosphorus and nitrogen group. So that's where the name phospholipid comes from. This part's phospho and this part's lipid. The head is hydrophilic, meaning you're so tired of this, meaning I love water, meaning it mixes with water. So here's what it looks like when you put a bunch of them together. These are the heads, and then the tails kind of spread out like this. So when we do our next unit, not even this one, but the one after that, you can see that things can kind of squeeze in here, but if you look at how close these things are together, there's really anything that's not something that mixes with oil is going to have a hard time getting through. We'll look at that again later. I'm going to skip this video because videos never come out on this, but I'll definitely put it on It's Learning for you. I think I'm going to stop here because that's the phospholipid.